The Premier League CEO Richard Masters says there is no happy alternative to enforcing the rules, as new information about when Manchester City's hearing into 115 alleged breaches of financial regulations will be held. It's emerged that the hearing has been brought forward to begin in mid-September. It's believed the case could last more than 2 months. One source has indicated a decision would come next year. Manchester City strongly deny all the charges and say they have irrefutable evidence, quote, to support their position. Let's talk to senior reporter Rob Dorsett, who's been speaking to Richard Masters today. Good evening. Did you get much out of him?
About those outstanding 115 charges against Manchester City, because it is a legal process and it is an independent commission that will now decide the outcome of those charges. So his hands were tied to a large extent. But I think, look, any time there are charges brought by the Premier League against a Premier League club for allegedly breaching the profit and sustainability rules, it's a big, big story. But when it comes to Manchester City, it's bigger. And why is it? Well, look, here is the Premier League trophy. That's what today's launch was all about. But, of course, it's festooned in the light sky blue of Manchester City as the reigning champions. And if we look down here, you can see on the engravings on this trophy just how dominant Manchester City have been for the last decade. Look, they've won it in the last 4 seasons. In fact, look a bit further over here. They've won it 6 times in the last 7 seasons. They have been absolutely dominant in the Premier League. They are the best side in it and the favourites to win it again this season. So when Manchester City are levelled with 115 charges, many more than has ever been seen against any of the other previous Premier League clubs who've been charged, by the way, it's a huge story. It's a huge problem for the Premier League, in truth, because it strikes at the very heart of the integrity of their competition. That's why they feel so strongly about it. That's why they're determined to get a resolution. And what I understand about the timescale and the process from here, the Premier League are keen to get the matter resolved as soon as possible, because of the circumstances that I've just described. It's been more than 5.5 years in their investigation to get to this stage. But the reality is that any decision from that independent commission that'll look into this case is unlikely before the spring. Why is that the case? Well, it's a legal process. It's independent of the Premier League. It's independent of Manchester City. And so it's a legal process where the schedules can slip. As things stand, we do expect that formal hearing to start in the middle of next month, and I expect that process to last around 10 weeks. It may take longer, of course. You can't be specific about those timeframes. During that 10 weeks or so, though, that's when the Premier League and Manchester City will present their cases via their lawyers to the Independent Commission. So there's an awful lot of evidence to go through. The Independent Commission, having heard all of that evidence, which is probably just before Christmas, will then go. And even if they come back then, the decision will be made public and we will have an idea of what, if anything, Manchester City will be punished with. Even then, Manchester City are likely to appeal that decision. That could knock it forward further months and probably into next season. But I think the hope and the expectation from all sides is that this very, very important matter will be concluded at some point in 2025. But before that, we may get some word in the spring, some decision from that independent commission, hopefully in the spring. So that's the background. That's what we think we understand so far. None of that detail came from the Chief Executive of the Premier League, Richard Masters, today. But I did speak to him at length about this issue.
The way that our rules work is we announce charges and then we announce the decision when that process is completed, and that will happen. I've confirmed publicly the date has been set, but I can't be drawn on when that date is or the substance of the case itself. When it does happen, though, is this something that's going to be concluded this season? Well, again, are you confident about that? You're asking me to sort of speculate on the timing of it, and I simply can't do that, unfortunately, Rob.
OK, but is it fair to say that the Premier League and everybody involved in this game wants the champions who've won the title in the last 4 years and a pretty high-profile dispute between them and the
well, I think where you started this question, you said that everyone wants this to be resolved, and I agree with that. I think it does need to be resolved. As you also said, it's not in our hands, it's in the hands of an independent panel. They are in charge of the timing and the running of the process, and we must let them get on with it.
The thing is, these are such significant charges. I mean, we've been talking a lot about Everton and the number of points deductions in recent seasons, with Forest as well, the charges you've got against Leicester right now. They matter. They impact decisions on where the title might go. So it's actually a big issue for you, isn't it? Because it's fundamental to the Premier League as a competition. What happens to Manchester City going forward? I appreciate you can't say a lot on it, but it matters, doesn't it, Richard? This is important.
It does matter. Yeah, it matters, and I understand that it creates uncertainty and some frustration. But there is no happy alternative to enforcing the rules, which everyone has agreed at the beginning of each season. They've looked each other in the eye and shaken each other's hand and said, we will abide by these rules. And so the Premier League has to enforce rules. Whatever difficulty or frustration that creates is part of maintaining and protecting the Premier League's competition. Its core value, it's a competitive competition, and that's really my role, and that's what I want to continue doing.
Rob, you'd imagine we're going to hear a lot about profit and sustainability rules and charges from that this season. Chelsea under close scrutiny.
The clubs in the Premier League are under close scrutiny. That's what Richard Masters made clear today. The PSR rules haven't changed for this season. They're exactly the same as they were for last season, and we saw how many clubs fell foul of the Premier League rules last season. So we wait to see who will be charged. Certainly Chelsea are being investigated over this potential issue of the sale of hotels to one of the group's sister companies. Richard Masters says all of that is permissible under the usual accounting rules, but the league has to be sure that everything Chelsea have done is above board.
Well, I think what you're talking about is the ability to sell assets, fixed assets, which is permissible under rules. One of our main duties under the APT rules is to assess transactions, intercompany transactions, at fair market value, and we'll continue to do that. We don't publicly comment on the outcome of those adjudications, nor do we confirm either way. What it goes into is PSR calculations, which are the main financial rules. So I can't really comment on the Chelsea situation either.
What's clear from speaking to the Premier League chief executive today is that they will flex their muscles. They will enforce the PSR rules strictly, as they did last season with any club that is prepared to flout those rules this season. And that's irrespective of reputation. We're talking about two of the biggest clubs in the land here, aren't we, in Manchester City and Chelsea. They are analysed in exactly the same way as all the 20 Premier League clubs are. So PSR, I think, is going to be a word that we use an awful lot throughout this Premier League season to come, for sure.